everyone, I'm Diana. I am from Denver, Colorado, and I work at Vonage as a developer advocate. And today I'm going to be talking about what online dating has taught me about algorithms. So let's get into a history lesson real quick. So once upon a time in the 1960s, there was a dating service called the St. James Computer Dating Service, and it's actually not notoriously known to be the first dating service because people always gave credit to the men who created something after. So this was created by Joanne Ball, who was a natural matchmaker for her friends. She was like, you and you get married, cool, great, let me monetize on this. And so, just to keep in mind, this was during the 60s. So marriage was a necessity for women in order to make sure that they can provide for themselves or, have food on the table, a roof over their head. And so what was kind of unique about hers, not that there was something to compare it to back then, but it focuses on the qualities that you dislike and would not tolerate in a partner versus saying what you do like. So pretty much this was a service that was like, list all your red flags. All right, and then the next year in the US, Operation Match came out, and it is actually the very first computer-based matchmaking service in the US. So Jeffrey Tarr and Vaughan Morrill, they were Harvard students who kind of struggled to just meet girls. No, that was it. Like, there was no other part to that. Yeah, so they struggled, and they were like, let us create a dating service. And that's exactly what they did. And so pretty much, you end up filling out a pamphlet about yourself and your dating habits, and then, they match you up. So the process here. So first, you fill out the questionnaire pamphlet, and then you mail, 1960s, you mail the pamphlet with $3 in cash. After that, all your answers in this in the pamphlet are then transferred to punch cards, and then these guys, they process it on a computer between the hours of 2 to 4 a.m. And you might wonder, why is it 2 to 4 a.m.? Because it was cheaper to rent then. And so these guys went to class, did their homework, whatever, and this is what they did at night. And then after that, about 2 weeks later, you'll receive mail that lists all the names and phone numbers of your top 6 matches. So, no pictures, no nothing, you're just like, hi, so I got you. Would you maybe like me? Yeah, so examples of questions. If you're curious, you can scan this barcode or QR code, or you can just have it available after if you just want to listen and hone in on this. So you'll have your basic information, name, age, etc., your attitudes, like do you think romantic love is necessary for a successful marriage? Or situations, they're very specific, oddly specific situations. You know those HR videos that you watch and it's like, oh, is this considered sexual harassment? And it's probably because someone went through it. So, situations like in a snack bar, you overhear a college girl saying how her roommate, da 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 da. And last but not least, physical appearance. So, how did all of this work? I don't know. Exactly. And I say that because there isn't a whole lot of technical, data out there about it, but based on what I could figure out about Operation Match, this is what we do know. So most questions were answered by giving a score on a 1 to 5 scale. Those this is important to me, not really important to me, and you kind of choose something in between. And so the closer the answer, the higher the compatibility score you'll have with someone else. So this is how I think it probably worked. So you go through all these steps with data encoding, weight attribution, similarity scoring, pair matching, and output generation. So I'll go through each one. So step 1. Data encoding. You probably all know that computers, they read things in ones and zeros rather than actual text. So, for example, if it was a yes or no question, you would give it a binary value. So, are you willing to date people from outside your own area? You can decide yes, which is 1, or no, which is 0. Now, they're not all yes or no questions, and so giving ranking answers on a scale made more sense to use ordinal values. So for example, indicate your interest in German language and customs. Why is this one of the options? I don't know, but then there were multiple languages you can choose from. They're German customs, English customs, Irish custom. And you're okay, well clearly there is some niche people out there who have a high interest in these things. So, very interested, kind of interested, not really interested. Those are the numerical values that you might associate with them. So here you have step 1. And then I just included some Python code down here. I know this is like a really short talk, so for brevity, I will write a blog on this in case you wanted a bit more details. Now, step 2, weight attribution. I would hope that not everyone thinks that every question on this questionnaire is of equal value. So for example, like, do you like dogs? Let's say it's like at a 3 of importance. And then do you want kids? I would assume it's a little higher than whether or not you like dogs. And then whether you like hiking, maybe that's like not, again, might be less important between, wanting kids and hiking. So again, indicating your German language customs and interests, that might be a 2, who knows. And then here you can see how I had assigned weights to each of these questions. Now, next. Let's say our users are Alice and Bob, and they answer these questions accordingly. And just for brevity, I'm just going to stick to the yes or no questions for this section. And so here, we put them into an array and put that into our code. Now, step 3, similarity scoring. So you're going to have to, this is a little bit like high in code and like calculations, but you're going to calculate the square differences between Alice and Bob's answers. So if they don't agree on something, then you should find that difference and then figure out how compatible they truly are. So if it was like, I think Alice said she liked dogs and he said he didn't, and so going through each of them, that's how it works. After that, you'll square the differences, and then you'll take the square root of the sum to find the Euclidean distance, which is here, and then finally, you find the Euclidean distance between Alice and Bob. I know that was a bit a lot. So let's look at this more like easier to understand by using some just sample data. Let's say we are looking at this here, and all of these are people who scored on like certain parts of this graph. So how important is physical appearance to you? And then you answer accordingly. And members of the opposite sex consider me okay, Henry and George, they're like, they think I'm hot. So pretty much like, let's just go with this. And the algorithm here is gonna be the k nearest neighbor. The k nearest neighbor means that wherever you land, you're gonna be, like the neighbor closest to you is going to be the k nearest neighbor. So Alice here, she is right there, which means that her k nearest neighbors are Charlie, David, and Bob. Yeah, so it's a very high chance that she's gonna end up getting their phone numbers, or vice versa. Now, pair matching, that's gonna be, the part where they actually find out or figure out what makes sense. So let's say that these are the distances between Alice and the other users. So after that, you are going to want to sort it, and like I said, the smaller or the closer to 0 the Euclidean distance, the higher the similarity, because, like 1 minus 1, 0, 0 minus, yeah, okay, y'all know it, I'm sure. So after that, you're going to sort the users by their similarity scores in ascending orders. And like I mentioned before, there are going to be 6 people, and so you'll get the 6 top users, and finally, these are the people that she will get their numbers in this case. So yeah, from what I understand or what I was able to find, this is pretty much more or less of how OkCupid had worked. Now, moving on to dating apps, how many of you are familiar, seen, or heard of any of these? Yeah, kinda, yeah, okay. The traumatized people, I see you. So how do people get matched on these modern dating apps? I kinda know, just because the internet is now a thing, and I did some research and I got as much as I could. So let's start with OkCupid. So OkCupid, their CEO was like very transparent with their factors. So one of them is a match percentage. So what we're gonna calculate. The number of unread messages, which represents pretty much like the inactivity or activity that you have. Random number, this is more like a just in case number, which I'll get into, and attractiveness distance. So once you add all of these together, more or less, you'll get your match. So OkCupid, here's what we do know about how their algorithm works. First, you're gonna get the question. They're gonna ask you for your answer, and how you want the other person to answer. And then they add the weight of how important this question is to you. After that, it'll take your data, your match's data, and then decide on whether or not you are a match. So let's start with match percentage. So here we have Alice and Bob. We're going to have the common questions in this equation represented by S, and pretty much this is the number of questions that you'll get. And just for brevity, we're going to work with 2 here. So how frequently do you bathe or shower? Yeah, these are questions. So options: at least once a day, 2 a couple times a week, or 3 once a week or less. Alice here, she showers at least once a day. And she would hope that her partner also showers at least once a day. And how important is this to her? Very important. So we're going to take all of that, put that on hold. Now, Bob, on the other hand, is also going to go through the same process. So how frequently do you bathe or shower? He also bathes at least once a day. And he's okay if his partner just showers like a couple times a week. And how important is this? Not really, which is like mildly concerning, but okay. You know, to each their own. So our second question is going to be, are you a better conversationalist or listener? Alice here is like, so conversationalist or listener. She's a listener, and she also wants a listener so they can just like sit in silence, and that is ideal to her, okay. And it's a little important, you know, if you like exchange a sentence or 2 after that, it's like, I don't know, I get it. Like sometimes I'm like, I need you to stop breathing. Like I just get pissed off. Just like anyone else? No, just me? Okay. Yeah, okay. They're like, yes, I need you to stop speaking, breathing. It's too loud. It's, says a lot about me, but okay. Bob, on the other hand, conversationalist and wants a listener. So he's just like, I'm gonna talk and you're just gonna sit there and, you know, listen to me talk. And it's somewhat important to him that, you know, he finds a listener. So what happens here is that we're going to start assigning weights. So if it's irrelevant to them, 0, and it kind of goes down until we get a score of like mandatory. So this is like what people really, really need and want out of their partner. So how much did Bob's answers satisfy Alice? Here we're going to see how many possible points Bob could have scored on Alice's scale. So here the score is based on importance. So earlier we asked about like showering, and she said that it's very important. So we're going to start off with 50 here. And thankfully, Bob also showers. So he's going to get a score of 50 out of 50. Now, Alice said that being a listener was kind of important, so it was only a 1. So we added 1 to the equation here. And Bob was like, oh, I'm sorry, this is not, oh no, it's about conversing. And because he's a conversationalist, she was just like, okay, well, he didn't get marks for that. So 50 out of 51, not too bad. And so it's like a 98% satisfactory rate, I think, if I did my math right. I think yeah. Why did I doubt that? Okay. Now, how much did Alice's answers satisfy Bob? So he said that it's kind of important that she showers. Yeah, and the thing is, she said that she showers at least once a day versus like a couple times a week. And so I kind of hate this because the scoring is like all or nothing. I don't think it should be a bad thing that she decides that she wants to shower a few more times a week than whatever he expected. And this is kind of like one of those things where I'm like, but I'm sure they kind of, you know, figured that out, fine-tuned this model. Now, he thinks it's somewhat important that he's with a listener, which she isn't. Or sorry, he wants to be with someone who just listens to him, and now I realize that I made a mistake on the slide. So he's a conversationalist and he's looking for a listener, but pretty much she like hit those marks. So now it's a 10 out of 11. So once you do that math, she's gonna get a 91% score between, you know, him and Alice. And again, not so bad. So finally, they're gonna have to calculate the final match percentage. So like I mentioned earlier, S is going to represent the number of common questions that they had to answer, in this case 2. So here we have Alice, 91% when it came to scoring, multiplied by Bob's 98%, and we're going to take some nth root of that. And as we mentioned earlier, this is the number of questions. And as we mentioned earlier, n equals S and S is equal to, and that's why we're going to square root it here. And finally, we get 94%. Now, a lot of you might be wondering, why don't we just use a normal average? And the reason for that is because when you're taking a normal average, for example, you're trying to rate a competition, or you're trying to figure out what score you need to get a certain grade in class, that's great. But when you have other values that just have a wide range in different properties, for example, like we said, the number of questions, the weight of each question, because having children and liking dogs is not quite the same level of importance, that's when we're going to use the geometric mean, which is what we just calculated right there. And so I mentioned there's that compatibility, or the match percentage, and unread messages. Something that the CEO of OkCupid had mentioned is that unread messages kind of indicate inactivity. And so if you're not even on the app, then you're kind of wasting people's time. And so they're not going to match you to as many people. And I think third on there was attractiveness distance. So this here shows you how men rate women from an attractiveness scale. And I guess the average here is a 2 out of 5, while women rate men, in the opposite. No. You'll get what I just said, right? And then women tend to rate men a lot lower, while men rate women a lot higher. So this is the perception of male attractiveness versus female attractiveness. Does this mean that ugly men are on OkCupid? No. It just means that women are more demanding when they rate men in this category. And then finally, random number. So what they were saying in the book Dataclysm, which is actually the CEO wrote this book explaining the algorithms here, the random number is the just in case number. Just in case there's that outlier person that you decide that you want to match with. Because also, if you think about it, when you are doing a search online and you search, the same terms, more or less you're going to end up seeing the same results every single time. And that's why they had to throw in this random number. So just as a review, OkCupid's algorithm, they account for match percentage, which we calculated, unread messages, which indicates inactivity, attractiveness, and the random number. No, excuse me. So next, let's look at Tinder. How many of you are familiar with League of Legends? All right, please identify all the toxic people in this room. I'm just kidding. So League of Legends, they use something called an ELO score. And the ELO score is practically a rating algorithm that tells you where you rank amongst other players based on your skill level and all those other things. Tinder, they have a whole paragraph that I didn't want you all to have to read, but the TLDR is that we used to rely on ELO scores and now we don't, which is kind of their way of saying we still use it, but we don't want you to think that that's the only thing we use, because then you're gonna go and cry yourself to sleep, because ELO score is actually very, very shallow. So first and foremost, let's say that a new player or user starts off at 100. So this is their score. They're then considered a standard user. And so player 2, this is another person on the app, they have a score of 200. This means that they are considered a high quality user. And then 3 and 4, they have a bit lower scores, and so that's kind of what we're working with here. So let's say we have Alice here. She's a standard user, and these are the people that she can potentially match with. And we're actually going to go in this chronology because it's not like her score resets after each one. So here, Bob, super high quality person. Handyman has all those good things going for him. So 200, he's considered a high quality person. Captain Hook and Ursula, not so much. So here is pretty much the code that goes into calculating it. So the level difference here multiplied by that 0.4 and then everything after that, That's called the decay factor. I had to fine tune it a little bit and just like play around with the numbers, just so there isn't just such a significant drop. Oh, sorry, I should have explained ELO score a bit better. So if you're a high quality person and you end up matching with a low quality person, but you agree that you want to go on a date with them, your score drops because you just decided that this low quality person is onto your tier. Yes. And so your score significantly drops while theirs significantly rises. However, if you're a high quality person and you are matched with a low quality person, but you decide that you don't want to date with them, or like you swipe left, then you just like insignificantly raise your score while they just like insignificantly lower their score. So this is pretty much what that is representing. So like we mentioned, Alice here decides, yeah, Bob, you're cool. So she swipes on him, and this is the result. So his score from 200 is gonna drop to 182. I'd say it's not too bad just because she's considered like a standard user, so it's not like 50-50 where like because his score was double hers, he's like double the value, but I had to set that as like the standard score, which is why I tweaked that other value there. So Captain Hook, she decides, nope, not about you. So her score just goes up a little bit while his goes up a little bit too. Now Ursula, she was just like, okay, I'm here for a baddie. So she decides that she's gonna swipe on her. So her score just like practically tanks, and her score goes up significantly. Now, this is kind of the part where you see all the results. You ask to print their score, and that's what I showed you. So this is pretty much like people's final scores. So just bearing in mind, like Alice, she started at 100. Bob had like a much higher score, and these two, they just, yeah, Captain Hook's didn't go down that much, while Ursula's went up pretty significantly. So, moving on to Hinge here. So how many of you are familiar with Love Island? Yeah, there's some like really enthusiastic people. They're like, yes, yes. So Hinge works with the similar concepts as Love Island, and the algorithm used here is called the Gale-Shapley algorithm, which actually won a Nobel Prize. So how it works. Let's say that these are people all on an island, and they have to decide who they want and who they don't want. And normally, like when there's an even number, you're gonna be coupled with someone, you know, like you're gonna end up with someone. But I recently learned I should really watch Love Island so I have like some credibility here. Occasionally they'll like add a person, and what do they say? They say like, a hot new bombshell has entered the villa. Am I right? Something like that. Is that the right show even? Like my friend told me about that, and I was like, that sticks with me. So right now, there's a very high or like 100% chance that everyone is going to be coupled with someone. But if they end up adding another person and someone else joins the house, then that's gonna have an imbalance, and that like leftover person gets eliminated. Yeah. So let's say people will decide what they want, right? So Alice decides that she wants to be with Bob, Ursula decides she wants to be with Captain Hook, and Ariel also decides she wants to be with Captain Hook. And yeah. So Bob decides he also wants to be with Alice. And Captain Hook also decides he wants to be with Ursula, which means that these two people are leftovers. And so, and then Eric wants to be with Alice. So like I said, those people decided that they like each other, and because these two like each other, they're gonna be paired, which means these two are leftovers. And this is how my parents describe their marriage. They're like, yep, two people, no one else wanted us, so we're stuck we're stuck with each other. Yeah, now let's say that there was like another person here, no one else wants them, and so they get booted off the island, from what I understand of the show. People are like, someone wants to correct me, they're kind of like, but then I don't want to like admit that I watched the show. Yeah. So pretty much those are the algorithms that I wanted to cover for this talk today. I definitely have like a longer version of this talk. I'll make sure that at some point I get that recorded if you wanted to kind of elaborate on that. But one of the takeaways that I did want to mention, because I kind of went at this at a different direction than just like, let me tell you how to optimize on dates there. And it's not quite that. It's more of me finding these apps, doing my research, doing a lot of research, oh my gosh. There were like some research papers where they were like, so my resources and credibility is based off of me using the app and watching the news. And I was like, I cannot believe I just read like 6 pages of this to be told that. Anyhow, so this is definitely not a like, this is how you figure out your worth or how to optimize on dating apps. We can definitely talk about that after. That's a whole different talk, but. So just to recap here, Operation Match, they went through all these different steps in order to find your match and send you those 6 names and phone numbers so that you can, maybe find love. The interesting thing is during one of the applications during the 60s, the very first couple that got married did not speak the same language. So, like, I think the husband or wife spoke English and the other one spoke like Scottish or Irish or something. And then they got interviewed, and I'm guessing only one of them answered the interview. Yeah, so, and then they were like, oh, but they helped me improve my English versus the other language. And I'm like, that's an interesting way to start, but okay. Okay, Cupid, I should have like linked the book here, but I use a lot of just references and got my research from Dataclysm, which is the book that their CEO had written. And I think it's actually really informative. There are moments where I was just like, okay, you don't have to drag other applications that hard, okay? He occasionally talks at other conferences as well, but pretty much that. So we saw that diagram looking at the match percentage and seeing how active these people actually are, decide whether or not they are like ugly or hot enough for each other, super shallow. And then finally the random number, just so they can like mix the pot or stir the pot just a little bit. Tinder finally, ELO score, how hot are you? And honestly, I think this is like all of it is pretty shallow. I know Reddit posts are like, oh, do you think that dating apps no longer use ELO scores? And the first person that gets like 1,000 likes is like, absolutely not. Like they definitely still use it. So part of me is kind of curious like where I would fall under that, but I think just for my own sanity, ability to sleep at night, I am okay with not knowing. So, and then finally, Hinge, they use that Nobel-winning algorithm, Gail Shapley, where everyone is with the best possible partner available to them. I think those things are very important because, there's always going to be some people who are like, oh, I want to be with multiple people, but then no one likes them. And so you are not, like those people are not options to you, sadly. But pretty much that is my findings and what I personally found out as I was navigating online dating and just learning about it from a technical perspective. So, last but not least, thank you so much, Carolina Code. You've been wonderful. Thank you to all our sponsors and Barry, wherever you are. He's like, yeah. Oh, hi. Yes. He's like, yeah, I'm going to start my jokes again soon. But other people are like, oh my gosh, Diana, please stop, please keep talking. But I'm Diana, developer advocate at Vonage. Again, thanks for having me, and I hope you enjoyed this talk.